Good morning. This video, its name is What If? What if there was a group of nations in the world that decided that the Catalans, were being persecuted by the Spanish, that the Spanish were taking from Catalonia the assets of Catalonia, taking it for themselves, and that it was an unequal division. The Catalans were given the short end of the stick. And that group of nations decided that they were going to recognize Catalonia as an independent nation. And Catalonia, the Catalans, had decided that they were going to have their own constitution. And one of the principles of their constitution was that they would destroy any vestige of Spanish authority on the Iberian Peninsula. In other words, if you weren't Catalan, they were going to chase you out of the Iberian Peninsula. That was their credo, from sea to shining sea. Catalan will be free. What would the Spanish say to the countries that recognized the independent country of Catalonia? I'll give you another example. Ulster, Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. The reason for that is because one of the great kings of England sent Protestants to inhabit that part of Ireland so that they could have a foothold and control the population of Ireland that way. Eventually, Ireland, through many trials and tribulations, much suffering and wars, became an independent country. And it's no secret that the Irish Republic Army, the Catholics of Ireland, demanded that Ulster be reunited with all of Ireland, and that if the Protestants didn't like that, they were welcome to go back to England. And many wars were associated, many acts of terror were associated with that endeavor. Today, Ireland has made peace with the reality of Ulster, of Northern Ireland being part of the United Kingdom. But there's a group in Ulster that doesn't want to be part of the United Kingdom. They are Irish. They're just Protestant Irish. But they believe that their religion and their way are superior to the rest of Ireland. That's to the west and to the south of them. And they have in their proposed constitution the annihilation of a Catholic Ireland and the establishment of a Protestant Ireland controlled by Ulster. That's their new constitution. And Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, part of the British Empire, former British Empire, all recognized Ulster as an independent country and accepted the political condition of Ulster as one that's legitimate, just as legitimate as that of Ireland. What would the Irish say? Do you think that they would look kindly to the Anzacs, the Australians and the New Zealanders, or the Canadians, for the chutzpah of accepting an entity that wants its destruction? In northern Norway, there's a group of people that are indigenous. They are called the Sami people. They're also known in English as the Lapps. They are part of Lapland. The Eskimos who live in Norway, Sweden, Finland, and parts of Russia. And they extended to Siberia. There are about 25, there's about 40,000 Samis who live in northern Norway. And they decided, together with their brethren in Sweden and in Finland and in Russia, that they were going to make a greater Lapland empire. And they had, as part of their constitution, a demand or a goal of the removal of the Germanic tribes that entered their holy land of Lapland, and that they were going to expel from all of Norway, Sweden, and Finland all of those entities that are not Lapps. And that's their credo. And the Germans and the Poles and the Italians all ratified acceptance of Lapland as a new country, including its constitution and its government. What would Norway say to Germany, Austria, Italy? What do you think they would say? Mazel tov for a new nation? It just so happens the Lapps, the Samis, were indigenous before the Goths or whoever they were came into Norway and displaced them from their traditional lands. And by the way, the Norwegians discriminated against the Samis. That's part of history. They treated them like blacks were treated in the South. The Protestants in Ulster were targets for bombings. For, I don't know, almost 100 years, till recently. The Catalans only recently decided to express their desire for independence, but they've been used and abused by the rest of the Spanish. They were there before the Spanish came, or much of the Spanish came. They have a long history there. Why shouldn't we recognize Catalonia? And the answer is we can recognize Catalonia. We wouldn't accept a government that has as its credo the destruction of a democratic state of Spain. And although we are sympathetic to indigenous people, if the Samis want to kill all the Europeans in Norway, Sweden, and Finland, we would reject that out of hand. We couldn't accept a government whose explicit goal was the destruction and the death of other people. So I ask you, Norway, Ireland, and Spain, the so-called Palestinians, who are not Palestinians, they were not indigenous to Palestine. They came at the end of the 19th and 20th century because suddenly there were jobs available, because a certain people called the Jews, whom you hate, those Jews who've been praying to go back to Zion for 2,000 years, 1,900 years, started coming back. and they drained swamps, and they built not just farms, but villages and cities, and started industries. And all of a sudden, there were jobs available. There was a way to make a living. And you Arabs came from Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Iraq, Iran, even from parts of Saudi Arabia. Came there because there were jobs. They weren't indigenous. And these Arabs who called themselves Palestinians, they weren't known as Palestinians until 1967 or 63, somewhere there. UNRWA doesn't say it's Palestinian nationals. They're just a relief agency for those who were displaced. The ones who called themselves Palestinians were actually the Jews. The original Jerusalem Post was known as the Palestinian Post prior to 1948. And part of these Arabs, these Libyans, Moroccans, Tunisians, Egyptians, Iraqis, and Iranians, this conglomerate of peoples have as their credo, as their raison d'etre, their reason for being, the ultimate destruction of the Jewish state. You wouldn't accept an Ulster that has as its raison d'etre the destruction of Ireland and the murder of all the people of Ireland, would you? Nor would you accept the death and destruction of those who were not Catalans in Spain. And you certainly wouldn't accept the death and destruction of all the Germanic and Middle Asian people who came in and inhabited Finland, Sweden, and Norway, would you? You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't accept a nation dedicated to the death of others. How dare you then claim to recognize Palestine, which was never a country, never a nationality, whose raison d'etre, whose part of its charter is the destruction of the Jewish state. I'll tell you why. And it's not pretty. We Jews have been wanderers. And wherever we wandered, for whatever reason we had to wander, God made us successful. For the most part. As long as the playing field was equal, we were successful. European anti-Semitism has a long history. It's not just religious, it's not just because we rejected Jesus Christus. It's not just because we rejected whom the Christian world claims as the Messiah. It's not just that. There is a hatred, a jealousy of the people of the book. They were more learned, they were more devout, and when they had the opportunity, they were more successful than their neighbors. We were the devil incarnate. Why were we the devil incarnate? We gave all of the morality, principles of living to the but you guys were thieves. Some Jews might have been thieves, but for the most part, Jews weren't thieves. And Jews certainly weren't murderers. They certainly didn't create They certainly didn't eat Christians for matzah, for the blood that's in matzah, which is made of water and flour. Been made that way for the last 3,300 years. The reason for the hatred is not just because we're different, but God identified them as his people. And for one reason or another, that bothers the other nations. And they want to prove that we're worse than other nations. So how can they prove that? By destroying us. And they almost succeeded. Jews numbered about 4% of the entire world's population at the height of the Roman Empire. Today, that would be about 300 million people. There are only 16 million Jews. What happened to the other 284 million people? Either they were killed, the children were taken away, they were forced to convert to other religions. But the 300 million that are supposed to be Jews are not there in this world. So the nation's almost succeeded, but we're still around. And guess what? It looks like we're going to be around for a long time coming. Those Jews who disappear, who assimilate and lose their Jewish identity, are becoming less and less in the land of our ancestors. The Jews who want to be Jewish and follow the Jewish ways are becoming more and more. So as long as there's an Israel, there will be Jews. So the people in Europe who have a history of anti-Semitism conveniently use the Palestinians, the recognition of Palestine, as a convenient way of trying to rid the world of its Jews. The minute Palestine is given national recognition, what's going to happen? Whatever happened on October 7th will happen over and over again. Unless we're careful, unless we Jews are careful. So why do you think we would accept a Palestine state with a charter of destruction of Israel? The answer is we won't. We won't, and we won't let it happen. We can't let it happen. Oh, you're going to go ahead and attack us. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. One thing for sure, we can't have another October 7th. We can't have an entity sitting next to us with a credo that wants to destroy us. We will never accept it, and we will fight. We'll fight on the plains, we'll fight on the hillsides, we'll fight at the beach shores, we'll fight in the air, we'll fight in the water. To paraphrase Winston Churchill, we Jews will never surrender.